John, does that look right? Okay. I just wanted, is there a way to minimize me altogether? Or no? When you're sharing, or you mean your face on my face? Because I'm on there as a, yeah. You're on that. It's, I think it's that you are. Let me try to get in the comedy session. I'm sharing your screen. Okay, now go ahead and share your screen again. Okay. I ordered some. It's the first, yeah, I'm not sure.
That's good. Yeah.
I think my
Working.
I wanted to.
Go.
So Ian, I missed the joke of the week or the month.
So that's really one of
The joke.
Oh.
Was it I don't know, they used to do that last week.
Oh,
I did it every week. Yeah, I just do it.
The camera's fine, okay, as long as it's there.
I did it once. We'll bring it back again in a couple of years.
That's great.
That's fine, I'm just saying that I was.
So you're looking up 50%.
I was the one who read the jokes.
That joke.
There's
Really?
there's a panel with one remote panel.
There were.
Yes, but I won't be presenting as a remote panel. Okay, so that's after, yeah.
Yeah.
Is the panel interesting? Yeah, okay. I might stick around and make sure that's good. Okay. Like I said, I'll still be. Okay, that's great.
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Doing well, thanks.
Come on, Ian.
You're on that, Ian.
How many school boards?
Yeah.
Three got to join in Vegas, so.
Say.
You're like,
So, you know, anything for a distraction.
yes.
Oh, the math. I never even got to that.
Each other.
Oh, and congrats, by the way.
Okay.
Do that. No, let me,
I did some,
I'll do it. I'm gonna do it tonight.
Probably not. I am like,
It's
Several of us got potential on.
Yeah.
Like how they're
yes, I mean, but how awesome is that?
So see, there's bright spots.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, they are. Good.
We're going for session and everything.
I mean, one of those.
And it's.
You don't, but you're not
Well,
gonna.
those-
Many things on my.
And there's the mail you.
What?
Put in my instruction.
You know, dealing with the assassination, I will be running a bill. HOAs.
You say separate lit, that's really funny. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. How many long days? 100%
I'm
on
a big
big
fan. I don't know what, I don't know what a family does. You know how to navigate the stuff?
Yeah.
It's terrific.
Yeah, just from the casino. There, from it. Wanted to promote. Landlord. But then it didn't. Yeah, I had
He
to.
spent more money. Your guys did better. Really is. So his picture, his thing, like that would not have been the way I would have recommended going. I look good on your side. That's not bad. The three-quarter shot's not so good.
The more you move, the more the owl will focus on you.
Oh, yes, it does look like an owl, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I like the sneakers. Or they're called sneakers anymore now.
Yeah,
Yes.
your artwork, we just got up today.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Very good.
Going to my empty nesting mom's art class today.
Yeah, I like that.
Are you an empty nester now?
I am an empty nester.
Was your reaction?
Yes.
Thank God, I'm so excited. No, I was just like, first of all, as soon as the first one could drive,
That was life changing.
Oh my God,
That was life changing. This one, I mean, she's doing great, but I miss her. But you know, that's okay. I mean,
Anyway.
she's where she should be.
where is she at?
At Arizona State, studying emergency management and homeland security.
Okay, getting ready for the border.
Well, she's very, very upset about these events, and it's like, hang in there, you've got 4 years to get your master's degree, and then you can go and.
Live already.
Yeah.
We're on live.
Thank you.
Even if we're not like in section.
So. .502, calling the meeting to order. Just we're figuring out some logistics. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, students? And board?
Aye.
Any opposed? Would like to welcome our legislators, newly elected legislators. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
And do you have anyone?
We have one person, I think we can go ahead and promote. Kelly.
Okay. And Kelly is, so present we have Representative Tana Sen and Senator Lisa Wellman. On remotely, we have Kelly Wynn, who is Representative Ty's legislative assistant, who is present with us. We have a different board than you saw last year. So let's quickly go around the room to introduce us, super quick intros so we don't waste time doing that, but not waste, but you know, can get to meatier stuff. And then after we do that, I will pass it off to our legislative representatives who are going to run the show today. Not me. So Lucy, you want to start?
I'm Lucy Blair. I'm the new junior student board representative.
Nice to meet you.
CDC.
And Maggie Tyser.
And I'm Christina Martinez, and I'm the junior Lesh rep, and we changed our structure just the last time we saw us. So I am the junior, and I will let.
And I'm Jody Lee, and I'm the senior, and we're doing that so we have some continuity between lead reps. So next year it'll be Christina and someone else.
Dan Getz.
Deborah Lurie.
Brad Rundle, superintendent.
So welcome. And like I said, we're trying some different things. And so our legislative representatives are gonna have prepared an agenda and a way for us to interact today. So pass it on.
So, we're gonna start with, because, students are a priority, we're gonna, like, sort of prioritize their voices there in this meeting, but we're gonna wait a few moments to see, if Ava Jean, our senior student rep, gets here, and, so that Lizzie doesn't have to bat solo. So, what we'd like to talk to you, saving time for that, we're giving them a big chunk of the meeting to prioritize their voices and their interests, and they're gonna speak mainly about transportation, mental health counseling, and special ed funding. So that is, of course, top of mind for us, but something that we're gonna let the students address. And then, of course, our other area of legislative priority is with MSOC and the funding in general, and sort of the economic shortfall that school districts have. I'm not telling you anything you don't absolutely know, but just to talk about how it affects us in particular on island. And then, of course, what we'd love to do is to hear from you and your sort of goals and aspirations for this new session. And maybe even if we have time, love to get a little insight from you on how the election nationally, but also at the state level will affect the work that you do in the coming session. So what I would really love to do now is to sort of have Fred walk us through the funding aspect of the funding disparity between, what we need and what we get from the state, and some stuff that we've done to adjust it. And we've seen that we have a legislative priorities document for your later bedtime reading that you don't.
So what the board did is actually set priorities clear back, I believe in June is when you had set the core priorities and worked there. And then the document that we provided you is so that you have as many facts and figures as possible for when you head down to Olympia based on what we have. And so we have everything from, where we started off with things like the McCleary fix with $2,500 a student, the 3247, and then we've given you some charts that we've put together just to kind of show a number of different components there. But the real priorities for us, in addition to the three that I know you've been hearing lots from our other partners around, for special education, just over $4 million. We have figures in there for you that we overspent last year. And, there was a change in the way safety net, the threshold moved from 30,000 to 40,000. And, not a huge hit, probably about 250,000 for us with that change, but still a hit there. The MSOC, just in our operating pieces around insurance, utilities, grounds, and maintenance, that's a $1.5 million deficit. Regionalization that we've talked about there, we appreciate that it's been held on to it and acknowledged, and certainly want to look at regionalization in terms of, how can we expand the language around the EP&O levy, and is there any appetite? We know there's not a lot of appetite for others to increase the percentage, but can we also collect that on the levy? We want to talk to you a little bit about capital improvements and facilities and how we can be partners there. And then certainly we know the prototypical school model is probably one of the tougher ones, I know, to address in a large way, but we certainly wanted to put those on there as well. So with that, I will turn it over to board members just to talk about specific areas of interest that they have in those. And then we can get into the numbers if you have questions on them as you're reading the document, or we can walk you through any of these numbers if you'd like that as well.
The thing that the number that always jumps out at me is just for the insurance and utility, and just like the absolute chasm between, what our basic, fundamental bill is and what we have today. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of
Absolutely.
how that's looking from your end.
Yes, and for whatever reason, MSOC has just been this big bucket that was not very clear as to what went into it. And I think that sitting down for hours with the financial officers of a number of different districts around the state to get a sense of, what is in that bucket, it isn't that it is unexpected. The fact of the matter is that the money goes out on a per student basis, when in point of fact, especially where registrations are declining, the actual things in the bucket are market rate priced. So they're inflating. And so that there's this huge difference. And there are things in there, I think, that people don't necessarily understand. Yes, you understand that if a school bus goes out, it won't be an electric bus yet, all of them, but if a school bus goes out, if there's 20 kids on the bus or 40 kids on the bus, the cost of the gas for the bus is still the same. Heating the buildings, all of those things, we've seen increases in prices, and we haven't increased the amount of money per student that has gone out, and we haven't been looking at that. So what we have done over the course of this last year is say, we've got to look at MSOC. And so we have done the kinds of information that you've provided with about a dozen or more school districts around the state, just to take a look at, is it pretty steady as to what we're seeing? And the answer is yes, no surprises. I do have our new insurance commissioner looking at the cost of insurance for schools, and why is it that there are districts where there have not really been any particular hard hits on that insurance, and yet theirs has gone up 28-38%, just like everybody else's, although you're in a pool, so you have to look at all the schools in that particular pool. But MSOC, there's a bill already in being constructed, if not finished, and Senator Nobles will be running that bill in our committee. As you may know, in the Senate, we have early learning through K through 12 as one particular committee, and we deal with bills that are theoretical, that are bills about new programs and educational types of things, as well as the bills that have costs associated with them. That's not the way that it's run in the House, and so we actually have to work with two different committees, appropriations and the Education Committee in the House, with three committees. That's your committee as well, for the early learning piece of it, to make sure that we're in alignment on that. So yes, in terms of EdSoc, we have quite a collection pretty consistently, but I think people need to know that it was things like, may not affect you, but paying for people to inspect elevators. It was just these little things that you don't think about that are part of operations, and just seeing the list of them was extraordinary and good. I think that we sat down and actually went over that. So that is happening, and I expect that I've already spoken to our governor-to-be about our need for additional funding, and the fact is we were down to about 44% of the budget. We had usually been upwards of 52% of the total budget, the operating budget, and I've been promised 50% at least, which will help, but it won't be a very expansive budget. It'll be a very tight year, so we're not going to initiate many new programs. We are actually trying to remove things, and we have gone through all the RCWs to look at things that we can just take off the table. Don't expect a lot in terms of what it actually affects you. There's maybe a lot of things, but we still expanded the scope of education hugely, from reading, writing, arithmetic kind of thing.
And on page 6, we've given you some data for that. So if that helps you, Senator, as you're working in terms of what utility costs have gone up versus our risk pool. I know that we worked really hard to get compliant with the Clean School Energy Act. And we have all of our schools up to speed there. So that's not a barrier for us. We were really diligent on that. But as Director Lee mentioned, the increases allocated for utilities and risk pool has really been the two pain points.
We've been discussing, and there's a kind of a bit of contention. I'm not sure which way it'll fall out, because some of the schools are unable to meet the goals of the Clean School. And their understanding is that there is some kind of penalty. And if there is in fact a penalty, I don't know that we're going to take it off, but we definitely have to push it out a couple of years, because it just can't hit the budget now.
Yeah, I think just to sort of drill down on what Fred said, I mean, as the chart shows, that for our district, particularly insurance costs, has been the vast bulk of that increase. So utility cost is actually pretty reasonable across the time period, but 136%. I mean, it just echoes what individuals like experience when it comes to car and home insurance. And I think a lot should be done about the escalation in insurance costs so people can understand exactly why. And I think the cost to public schools would be a great place for an insurance commissioner to start.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, I have not seen anybody's insurance cost increase to this number. This is, I mean, I'm 28, 30, 38% kind of in that range has been fairly typical. Nothing like this. So,
Those have been our annuals. It's been 28 and 30% out annually. over a
okay.
Period of
All
time.
right. And so you're looking
so
at,
it's from 1819 to now is
okay.
136% is what that is.
Okay. So that's an annual.
Yeah.
And nobody was talking about that. So that's a good number to know that it has been yearly.
Yeah.
So interestingly, liability insurance is a big issue for childcare right now and for affordable housing. So it's the entire liability insurance field, and it's something that's happening nationally. And so again, I agree, excited for a new insurance commissioner to take a look at it. And I think it's something on a national level that needs to be addressed because it is just, you know, extraordinary increases across the board, and we can't make up for that just to pay insurance costs. So.
And one question for you will be, like, you know our story, you're from here, and you have heard this over and over, and I get the similar districts around the urban districts. My question for you will be like, what will be, how can we help you kind of for you to make your job in the sense that send information maybe to other districts or work with the insurance commissioner? What information do you need from us to make this information impactful so we can make a change for education for the state? Or how can we work together in that sense that we can make this together as a team? Because I think that this is something that we have talked a few years now.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't know, something that we were thinking about. What else do you need from us to support you on your job for education?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that whenever we approach anything with education, it obviously impacts the entire state. And there's definitely, whether founded or not, the view that Mercer Island and Bellevue and school districts in our area are very well off. And from an equity point of view, people don't want to ensure that we have more money in a way that might make it less equitable for other school districts around the state. And so whenever we're talking about increasing revenue for our area, whether it's levies or, just straight dollars, we always have to include the local education, the levy equalization account as well. So for instance, you guys have brought up the idea, and I'm going to be introducing a bill to have our local levies count head count, not FTE. So meaning, so any student that goes to Running Start or is in preschool or however it is would be counted, and you could use that in your levy calculation. And that's really, quote unquote free, and that it's just about the local levy being able to ask for more. But then as part of the calculation, we have to think about, okay, well, for those school districts where they can't generate more dollars, even if they had those increased FTE increased headcount, how do we equalize that? And so then that gets into the levy equalization account, and that adds a fiscal note to the policy. And so having both an understanding and having them come. So if there's anything that you want, having more challenged school districts across the state also come together asking for something together, I think has the best impact.
That's fantastic, because we have next week we're going to the WASDA conference, and we're going to meet with them, and that's when we will start working on those collaborations.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that, I think our state struggles with this as a whole in terms of equity versus really recognizing the cost of living in a different part of the state, and then cost of labor as a result is significantly different. Speaking as a state employee, when I'm making the same salary as someone who lives, in a rural Eastern Washington, and yet
every one of my costs is like stupendously higher. It's like, that's not equity, right? So, you know, I mean, and I just compare that to the school costs and, you know, so really, and I appreciate all the work that's happening with MSTOC and that's really a dollars for dollars, but I can't imagine that our insurance costs are the same as, you know, a more rural place. And so, you know, even getting those dollars, like not even looking at disparities in income or opportunity, but really looking at the things that we have to have, our insurance policies, our staff insurance, you know, PEB and all that, big dollar for dollar that we don't have a choice on should be covered.
Some things that you are expressing are actually very much similar for different reasons. Your exposure to fire and
Sure. I mean,
Some of our
it's a
rural
very
communities.
general,
Yeah, no.
I'm making a very general comment.
Yeah.
And basically, like, I know that there's higher risk in some places, but other things, so maybe it balances out. But my point is that if we have to spend 1.1 million in insurance and that's a requirement for the school district, it should be compensated 1.1 million and shouldn't come out of levy dollars. And I mean, I'm just saying those are easy, like that's not even going after the prototypical school model. Those are basic costs.
Well,
And
and I think what you're saying also is at a minimum, having, the levy amounts be able to move with the cost of inflation.
Yeah,
Yes.
At least recognize that, you know, you're gonna have the same amount of money and have to do more with less.
Yes.
Or do the same with
Yes.
higher costs, and that just doesn't pencil out. When we think about the 1% for cities and
Right.
counties, and we think
Right.
about now, we're looking at the state budget with a huge deficit.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, because there's inflation everywhere and.
recognizing our privilege, but being able to, like, there are so many places where it's clear cut costs that aren't even covered. And if those are covered, then we can work within our system to provide for our students and make those choices. But we're diving in, we're having trouble building that. I know we're ahead of a lot of districts in terms of where we're now rebuilding our fund balance, whereas others are still going down. But every time we make a move to rebuild our fund balance, our costs get higher. And so it's a never ending battle.
Just to piggyback a little bit on your previous comment, you know, the thing with insurance is like, you know, that's a very basic thing that we're legally required to have in order to operate a school district. And yet the laws as they stand right now are keeping us from, you know, raising the funds that we could be raising that would allow us to meet that obligation. And so we're really like sandwiched into this weird little space, you know, in between the two sets of legal
There are
requirements.
going to be a number of bills floating. We'll see what goes forward. That will enable a little more movement with levy dollars. And I don't know what's happening in the House, but I think that we've got a couple of things on the burner.
Like more levy dollars or different ways that we can use them.
Ways that you can use more of what you get. What you're limited in terms of what voters have given you the ability to get. So maybe taking off the limitation on only being able to take a certain amount of what the voters have already said they would agree to.
Is that similar? Sorry, go ahead.
If we have any other points on this, because what I would love to do now is to maybe put a pin in this part of the discussion.
Director Gloss, did you have something?
Oh, yeah.
You had your hand up.
No.
Okay.
And then we can come back to it as time permits. But what I'd love to do is to hear from our student reps who have spent a lot of time soliciting opinions of their student body in general and getting some testimonials and quotes from them about the issues that are important to the students in our schools. And then as time permits after that, I'd love to hear your impressions on sort of the post-election landscape in the Washington State House. And then as time permits after that, come back to the financial aspect of it all. We've got plenty of time. So, Ava and Lucy.
Thank you so much. And also apologies for being here. Something came up, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. So we're gonna talk about, we're gonna
first start out with special education, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about. So I first want to thank you for like all the work you've done in the special education field. Recently, we hired a parapro, which has been super amazing for our schools and adjusting to their student needs in the classrooms. Although even with these new parapros and stuff, these professionals are definitely still struggling with their workload to properly provide for their students. We don't have enough of these parapros to provide sufficient one-on-one support. And furthermore, these professionals often have cramped offices, and the classrooms in our district are way too crowded, as we do not have the funding to improve these spaces. Having increased number of parapros is super important because this one-on-one support is super important for ensuring these students' success, which is currently impossible with our current staff allocation. So currently we're only allocated only 7.1 parapros, whereas our current staffing based on student need is 21 parapros, which is 3 times the amount allocated. And as a result of all of this, our district is running over $4 million deficit, as you saw, or 50% shortfall in funding, which is definitely severe. So therefore, it's really crucial for that our school district receives more funding to provide for this population. Looking at some quotes when we were talking to some different people, we got a lot of quotes saying like classrooms are really cramped, and in some of our programs that oftentimes don't have enough funding, and people really feel like they belong. So having more funding for these programs is definitely really important to help this vulnerable population really feel like they belong in our schools.
So do you have any kind of number that you can give us on the average class size that you're talking about as being really crowded?
No, it's more that the spaces can tend to be crowded for these students, like our buildings. I don't have the numbers though, sorry.
Yeah, we don't have exact numbers, but this is just like things that we've heard from the students from talking to them. Yeah, we don't have the numbers right now. Yeah.
Well, like, what are some examples of the kind of spaces you're talking about?
Yeah, so like our special education classrooms and resource classrooms, where it's students that are working like small groups to teach with teachers. Sometimes those classes will be more crowded because they're only like built and meant to serve a certain number of kids. Yeah.
And some of our therapeutic spaces, SLPs.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
And that has to do also with just the ratios of the numbers of staff versus the number of students.
Yeah,
who we can support.
Yes, and our next, the next legislative priority that we wanted to kind of touch on is mental and academic counseling. So similarly, our counselors are super important to like student education. And recently our district hired a college and career readiness counselor as well. And she's done massive amounts of work to help our students prepare for college and their careers beyond high school. And we're also blessed to have an amazing team of in-house psychologists in our district who help with our students' mental health and social emotional learning in our schools. And yet the state only allocates enough funds for 0.06 of 4.5 of our staffing for our district needs. So our district is funding most of our counselors just like out of our own local levies and money. And this means that like many students cannot like necessarily get counselors in times of need if there aren't enough. So like we have like, I think per school level, we have like a psychologist, but it's pretty spread thin for a psychologist to be helping 1,500 kids at a time. And so, yeah, having more support for counselors and raising would be nice. And also having counselors is especially impactful for newer students who often get thrown into like new environments. Like we just opened enrollment, and having these counselors to help ease the transition and be there for students and talk about any issues they would like is super important. And yeah, from students we've heard like a quote was, "My counselor helps me with whatever random thing I need help with." And it's very, very nice to always have someone to talk with. So our counselors really do play such a huge role in our education. Yeah.
And then the third reason we'd like to talk about is transportation. So another one of our priorities is increasing the funding allocation for transportation to cover rising costs of drivers, maintenance, and fuel. So Mercer Island has amazing bus drivers, and we've definitely been enjoying having these electric buses, much greater for the environment. But we still realize a pretty large negative difference between revenues and expenditures of $1.1 million because of these rising costs of fuel and students.
Mm-hmm. And we've heard that for some students, they sit 3 kids to a seat, which can get really noisy and sometimes dangerous when like the bus is like moving around and turning. And like sometimes it takes kids like 30 minutes to get home. And so having more bus drivers, having more funding for that would really be great to help bolster our transportation systems in our schools. Because transportation is definitely one of the big pillars for basic education in Washington and just everywhere. And also like having more comfortable like bus routes and more of that and surplus would allow for like more valuable learning time for students that don't have to worry about like being late to school, for example. And yeah, and currently state money continues to fall further and further behind the real cost of transporting students. So yeah, which is really essential to quality basic education.
Great, thank you.
I remember on the transportation side, both of you saying you've been looking at our numbers and
The
we're
numbers
falling
have
behind.
never been,
And
fully paid. Never.
They've never been, and I was like, oh, it's not our biggest thing, but now looking at it, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
A little bit every year. Yeah, it is. I will tell you that, there are so many districts, not to put down your perspective because it is what your school district does. There are many school districts that would give a lot to be able to have only 30 minutes on a bus. We try to keep it down, under 45 minutes because in some of our remote areas, it just takes a really long time to travel.
That was one of the reasons electric buses work so well here.
Nothing more than 7 minutes from anywhere else.
We're not limited by rate.
You
Excellent.
guys have 4 now? That's great.
One of the things that we're working on, which I hopefully will be meaningful in terms of our schools in general, I think has been, there's an organization called PESB, Professional Education Standards Board, and Educator Standards Board. And it is the organization that sits between the state and OSPI, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and all the standards for classrooms, et cetera. And then the preparation colleges where our teachers of tomorrow are coming from. And there's really been a major disconnect because our teachers have said, now you're incentivizing having young people who have special needs and thinking of learning disabilities. We want them to be in the regular classroom 80% of the time. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. And but we hear from those teachers, I've never had any training in special education. And now these people, and I don't feel that I can do the best for them. So we're trying to create a system where we're talking to each other, more the things that we do in schools. Like probably we're thinking more about remote learning and remote teaching, which before COVID, we didn't think too much about. But many of the teachers who suddenly were online had no experience teaching online. And it's kind of a whole new thing. And those who had professional development had the opportunity to get prompted and to have some experience or to learn from somebody who had good experience, found it was enjoyable. They actually liked doing it. And others who didn't feel competent or didn't feel that they had what they needed to do it. Nobody wants to be in a job where they can't do the very best that they can. And so we're trying to make sure that people have the training that they need to be able to do what is constantly changing about the classroom itself, because we are changing what we're looking at. One of the things, that we're doing more of is competency-based education, because a lot of people like to learn by doing. I'm sorry, stop doing that. So we're actually having teachers to be have the experience of being in a group that then specifically learns that type of teaching and has a chance to experience that in a very controlled environment so that they can feel very comfortable with what they're doing, which I think is really neat.
You're adding that also mental health education to teachers, because I think also, as we know, and as you point
Yes.
out, right, mental health permeates so many things right now, and they can't just rely on a school counselor or psychologist. Teachers need to have at least, a basic understanding so they know when to refer somebody out, when to get them help right away, and just at least to be in that supportive environment. So hopefully as we look at teacher training, that's another component that we're adding.
one of the things that it is now 2 or 3 years old, and hopefully you'll start to see it appear in your schools, is the fact that the ratio of counselors to students tends to be about 400 to 1, which is a lot of students, especially if you're talking about counseling them about the next phase of their life, whether it's college or a job or something else. And so we have invested in creating a universal high school and beyond plan that is not only a way of kind of interacting with colleges. One of the things that we found out was that there are a lot of colleges that would love to say to a student, Lucy, if you come here, it's already paid for because of your grades and other things we know about you. I don't know that that's true, Lucy. I'm just making it up. But you know what I'm saying. And so the colleges are saying, we want to be able to tell you what we could offer you. And so that can be built in, or you can explore various careers online and find out more about the opportunities, things that a counselor, if we had a better ratio of counselors to students, they might be able to share with you. But this is a lot of really good information that hopefully will help students interact and find out more about things that they enjoy doing. And mental health support, that we're doing more online, which I think is interesting. There's a program, but the University of Washington has a program for online support, because just getting somebody into various locations is almost impossible.
I'd love to hear how the no phones in schools is helping mental health and other behavioral health, and maybe even your perspective on how that's going.
I think it's really helpful for the behavioral health aspect of it. Like, I've noticed in my classes and I've heard from teachers that like people are being a lot less distracted, more engaged in their learning. And that's definitely been very widespread. It's also been good for like increased engagement in school. You know, you see in the lunchroom where people are talking to each other instead of being on their phone, which is really great. But the issue still permeates. Obviously, people are still on their phone outside of school. So those issues with social media and depression from phones are still definitely an issue, but it is a lot better inside of the school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And like, I think definitely there was a lot of pushback at the beginning, but like students are finally starting to see like the benefits. Like, wow, like in the hallways, like can you talk to my friends now, like at lunch, like that we actually like have conversations versus like looking at our phones. So that's been one great thing to see.
Yeah. One of the things that we did hear about from so many students, well, I don't know if it's surprising, but so many students said they're lonely. And that was, and I think that the use of phones, the extent that we were using phones really isolated people. And that now the things you're talking about, I think, reflect the fact that you're connecting with people. And I think that's healthy.
Sorry, one of the anecdotes for what I saw from free school is one of the physics teachers had a physics card and used to have a bell on it because students would be walking through the hallways looking at their phones rather than looking out at them.
Depression.
But now she's taken the bell off the physics card. Students are looking out rather than at the screen.
That's pretty telling, right?
You just came from a PAC meeting, I think our middle school, and there's a certain amount of how do you maintain compliance? We went with the pouches because it was the best way that we could have a symbol of like, we're committing to doing this. And, the degree to which we have compliance, that kids are actually putting them in, clasping it for the whole day. That doesn't seem to be as great, but the fact that kids aren't accessing their phones, even if they're putting them in their backpacks and not locking them, we're not having multiple offenses. We have some kids who push the boundaries more than others, but that's what kids do. But there's still some adult angst around kind of this push and pull. And I think you were at the middle school today for their PAC and kind of sharing.
Yeah, the parent advisory committee meeting today. This year, the theme for the middle school is multi-tiered systems of support. And one of the things they're doing is tracking behavioral referrals and the violation type. And and Aaron's here, Mr. Miller's here too, and he was at the same meeting and he runs it all. But it was really interesting to hear. I have just with my network, I just hear more about the high school. And it seems like a lot of the pushback with middle school, it's general middle school, middle schoolers are really different. They're pushing back on rules and that growth in a different way than our high school students do. But also, a lot of it is parent concerns as well, in terms of not being able to reach their child immediately. And really, we were strategizing on different things to focus on. Really, what's the why? Why are we doing this? It's not about cutting off communication between students and families. It's not about punishing for the sake of punishing. And it's really about mental health and engaging in the moment, in terms of in the classroom academics, as well as with your peers. And so it does, it's the beginning of it. But overall, I think it's been going really well. And maybe there's just some more emphasis that needs to happen in the middle school in terms of education with the parent community and alternatives with problem solving when there's executive functioning challenges and our middle schoolers forget to unlock their phone at the end of the day. And then the solution isn't, well, then just don't lock it. It's what strategies can we come up with so that you don't forget to unlock your phone at the end of the day, or strategies behind parents want to, our high schoolers are more independent, but middle schoolers are getting reminders from parents on what they're supposed to do after school. And so, what are some strategies in terms of making sure that our students are checking their emails, because they do have email access to their families during the day. It's just not texting immediately. And so reminding our middle schoolers that email has purpose. And you have to check it, right? And they all have their iPads, so they can check it in every class all day. So it's strategies like that. And it's really just problem solving to make sure that the change doesn't get in the way of their well-being, but it improves their well-being.
Did you send out, or was there widespread dissemination of the Surgeon General's report?
It was linked on our website. Looking over at our communications coordinator, we had it linked on our website after that had come out as part of our initial kind of push out.
And maybe it's time for a new, just checking in and if our admins think it's appropriate. And I know the middle school has done some of this because they've started to do some kind of spot checks as we're hitting the end of the trimester, in terms of compliance with the yonder pouches, and just reminders and making sure we're all on the same page. But at the same time, a re-explanation of the why, which I think goes a long way.
I think also one of the things that we had talked about years ago, before, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago, when we were talking about threats in schools and issues. One of the, I guess the superintendent of schools out in Bremerton was talking about the fact that parents, after 8 o'clock at night, this can be a real source of trouble. And I think that I would like parents to be really aware of the Surgeon General's report and really aware of what goes on in the evening after your responsibilities are over for the day, because things get exacerbated. And I know that I've been told by numbers of people, if this had been around when I was in school, I wouldn't be here anymore. I would have be gone.
Yeah.
So I think that we haven't learned the good behavior yet. Hopefully someday we will, but about how to use these. However, it does point to, this whole discussion does point to, I think, some of the things that we're very troubled about on a national level, having with this last election. If I can just mention that we certainly were concerned with in this election with the Parents' Bill of Rights initiative, which we, as you may know, we approved in session. We approved it because if it had gone to the voters and they approved it, we would not have been able to make any amendments for 2 years. And we felt that there were things in there that were very troublesome. We heard a lot from LGBTQ plus kids. And so we did approve it, and an amendment is prepared for early movement, on the floor. We'll hear it probably the first week and pass it along. And, the governor is aware of that. I think that was a very important thing for us to do, but I think also we should be thinking of, not just Washington State, but other states around the country now. We're hearing from kids and they're really scared. Transgender youth are very, very scared at what might happen to them. And that's one of the outcomings of this election that we've been through.
Yeah, and I would just want to underscore that, you know, Washington State and certainly your 41st legislative district representatives, and I believe all of you in this room too, are absolutely committed to making sure all of our students feel safe and welcome. LGBTQ kids, Jewish kids, minority and immigrant children, everybody. And we will continue to make sure that in Washington State people are, you know, welcome, and that we can do as much as we can to protect them. And just really want to reiterate that, because I think there's a lot of fear right now. And I think it takes leadership to make sure that we are promoting social emotional learning, that we're promoting empathy, that we are promoting kindness, and that we are not tolerating, you know, sexism, racism, all of that. So it's great to be in partnership with school districts and leaders who understand that, and you have the same views on that. So I'm really honored to represent North Carolina and Bellevue Municipal who have those same values, and just, again, rest assured to all the students and families that we are definitely, our goal is to remain very welcoming and protected.
On the topic of recent elections, the Seattle Times was, I would say, uncommonly critical of the incumbent at OSPI and the tenure over the last years, noting that Washington State is just 35th in graduation rates and 40th in college readiness, despite the most significant increase in spending of any state over the last 10 years. What do you think at state level can be done to address that? I know that certain states, like I believe about a dozen, have mandatory SAT testing in school. Is just sort of one tool in the toolbox to help with college readiness. But is there any plans to address, I think, the manifest lapses at the state level in our education system?
Okay. First of all, sometimes I'm not sure what the Seattle Times is looking at. If they're looking
The
at
US News and World Report,
Well,
that was what they
okay.
linked to for the.
but oftentimes they look at the NAEP scores and oftentimes not appreciating that they must be looked at in comparison to like by like. And if you just look across the board at those particular scores, we don't look as good as if you look at a like group of scores that represent our education system. This is what I've been told by Chris Rectoff. And I'm assuming that it's true. I think that we have more kids moving into community colleges than in four-year institutions. But that's been true of the state from the get-go as far as the next steps of careers. And in fact, we're finding that more and more kids are moving towards our competency-based education, which is one of the transformations that we're making in terms of the skill centers, special and using skill centers, using pre-apprenticeship programs, other kinds of education, moving in that direction. I'm not sure how that works with the numbers, kind of that you're looking at. We also, I think, as you know, have some of the most diverse populations with over 100 languages in Bellevue, for instance. I don't know how many languages, 50 languages in your school system, which I think are major challenges as opposed to some areas where, it's one or two languages. And so it's quite a tumultuous turnover in types of populations that we deal with here. I do think that I think we provide excellent education in our schools. When you say overall college ready, I'm not so sure how many kids feel like college is the next step for them. I don't know if that's part of the discussion that, is taking place, or it's the thing that I find distressing in general is that I'm told, I haven't experienced this, but I'm told that the number of kids who say that they want to go to college is somewhere above 65% of total schools. The number of teachers who say that they expect, what percentage they expect to be going to colleges is much lower. So I think that there's something happening in that space that we need to look at. Because I think when kids are encouraged, and I think that that's one of the reasons when I created the bill for the high school and beyond plan, I wanted kids to know that they have a path to going to college. And I think that they should be encouraged if that's the path and see that that's a possibility for them when that may not be something that their family is used to, wants for them, or thinks it's possible for them.
And I would just say, I appreciate the question, and I think it's an important one for us to look at and continue to reevaluate and evaluate as to what are the reasons, right? And I mean, I think in part our schools were shut down longer than a lot of the other states around the country. I think we also, as Senator Wellman said, we have such a diverse student body that we are also making sure that all of our students are learning English or learning in the language that works best for them. And then that, and then how we test and what's, how we test that it can be difficult, but I think we should never stop or shy away from those numbers, whether we're, parsing and we're 10% below or 50% below. I think we always want to do better for our kids. And so I think, again, making sure we're addressing mental health, making sure we're addressing teacher quality and understanding of mental health, making sure that we are providing that special education or the ESL or other, work is important, and that we're not getting old, and that we're continuing to look at the best ways we can do things.
Keep looking at it. Yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear what you think about, the current to pass a bond currently with the 60% photo approval. And is there do you see any movement with that going down to
I would say just a quick answer, yes. Would be my sense in the House at a minimum. I think, whether it's down to 55 or to 50, I think there's a lot of interest in doing that. I think especially given, this year there were, a lot of bonds that didn't pass, a lot that got over 50%, but that didn't pass. I think it will, if we do that, I think it would also come with some changes in how school formulas are paid for in terms of if you pass a bond, what money do you get from the state. Right now it's already quite low. It really basically covers kind of, a 10% of costs maybe. But is there a better way to do that where we're targeting and focusing more on schools that can't afford it, or on, making sure that the money is going out when the school needs it? If it's like literally shovel ready, not allocating it and then it's sitting on the shelf and waiting a few years. So I think there's some effort to kind of re-look at the formula at the same time as changing the percent. But I think that is of great interest, at least on the House side.
The answer is absolutely. We've had bills ready to run. We need to, in order to have that move, we need 60% of the body. And so had we had a supermajority in the Senate, the plan was to run a bill for a simple majority and moving it forward.
You might get one. That's all you need.
No, we won't. We won't have a supermajority in the
No,
Senate.
but you just one vote. You're saying you just need one more person.
No, I need 60% of the body. And I don't have 60% of the body of the Senate.
I'm saying that I bet maybe you can find a Republican to vote
Oh,
with
if I
you.
can find a Republican
To vote with
to
you.
break ranks.
Yes.
Okay, haven't found that Republican yet. Let me.
So related to bond passage rate, I think is a perhaps larger sort of question, which is declining enrollment because of demographic change.
Yes.
And it relates to school construction because when you have declining enrollment, it makes it a more difficult argument to make to the public when schools are bursting at the seams and there's, and there isn't capacity.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier to convince voters or to show why new facilities are needed. But it's not obviously just on the capital side,
Right.
that there's an impact. It's also on the labor side and throughout the system. I mean, also, obviously, when it comes to expenditures. So is there any sort of task force or thought of at a systemic level of the various challenges that will be faced because of declining enrollment that we know is already beginning to happen and is only going to accelerate? And then how that plays out in policy?
Well, first of all, I think that the idea, when you started talking, I was trying to think of the districts that I know. And there are a number of districts, unfortunately, that have not passed a bond in over 25 years, ever. Not certain districts. And in other cases, it's a usual thing where it's just, you just keep passing, you keep passing the bonds, and you have a population that is very supportive of education to begin with. You don't really have to convince anybody that education is important for the future of their children. In some cases, they just feel that they can't afford anymore. And, so it's all over the place in terms of trying to convince somebody that education is worthwhile and we need the money. I spent a lot of time, even before I came to the Senate, in rural Washington. And most of my time was spent in rural Washington. And it's really challenging for people there. The jobs are scarce. The amount of funding that people have, it's really hard for them to consider spending more. And the things that they think, it doesn't matter. I've got schools there where we're still talking about there's plastic holding up the roof from falling in on kids, literally. And buildings where, in fact, ESSER funds were enormous gift, and many schools just use them for their HVAC systems. Either they didn't even have an HVAC system that worked, or they needed to upgrade the HVAC system that they had. But can you imagine kids going to school in wintertime without really proper heating in their classrooms, or having, kind of safe schools?
And kind of back to your earlier question, I mean, frankly, where we spend our money as a society also dictates very clearly to our young people what is important. And if they're in a community with a school that's falling down and that we're not investing in it and in them, they're not stupid. That rubs off on them. They get it. They're like, you don't think it's important? Why should I think it's important? So when we think about replacing schools, that really is an important thing, both obviously for their health, but for learning and for prioritizing education. The great news, obviously, about the defeat of the 3 tax-related initiatives is that we are not losing funding from capital gains and from the Climate Commitment Act, which funds a lot of the HVAC systems that you were talking about, and making sure that schools are have the heat and the air conditioning they need. And so there's going to be an increase there. Which is going to be really helpful to be able to continue those kind of funds. But I also want to talk about the declining enrollment a little bit. I know that actually Mercer Island has seen some increases in your kindergarten and early years, and I think we're seeing that in some other areas. I think there's always going to be some of that migration, and frankly, young people are having less kids. And so there is going to be that decline. I think it's one of those tough things. And I know that everybody knows that, you might lose 2 kids per classroom, but you still need a building that has all those kids in it. And so there is that tension. So even if we're looking at it long-term, we still have to make sure that we're making the investments now until those things are impacted.
And apparently, which I didn't really realize, talking to Melissa DeVito over in Bellevue, CFO there, we spent a couple of hours, and she was talking about, she showed me the graphics ramping up for what was a very steep, increase, and preparing the school system size-wise for that, and then passing it and then going in the other direction, and just seeing that, as well as I think we did lose a couple of kids to online education and homeschooling.
But Issaquah is bursting at the seams, and we all know Mercer Island.
All over, yeah.
Right, you get this very cyclical. That's older people, like my kids. I'm an empty nester now, right? Like all of that. A lot of us are, right. All of that is kind of cyclical. And then people start selling their homes and then there's more young kids and then they, so it
By
also.
young kids, you mean adults.
Yes. Well, young kids, no,
Oh.
young, I didn't mean like 5-year-olds. I didn't mean actually young kids, but yeah.
I'm talking about the high
Kids
school
with people
band.
with young kids.
Yes.
I am so blown away, for whatever reason, that's kind of my go-to. I have it checked as on my social media that I get the reels of the high school band. They're amazing.
Mhm.
Mercer Island, I'm so proud to be here. I mean, you must be as well. I mean, it's just.
And the radio station.
Yeah.
And the National
Cross
Merit
country.
Scholars. And
Every time you coach my
Really
friend's
good.
child who's at Juanita High School in Kirkland, this kid is in like a band and jazz band and loves like radio stuff. And I was like, we have open enrollment right now. It's like, you're all outside. He's not happy at Juanita.
Can I ask about, more about the open enrollment that you have? And I know that Bellevue has like 3 times as many kids that they have taken in open enrollment. And it seems like a wonderful opportunity for people. How is that working and who is coming? Who are the students? Is it exacerbating inequities elsewhere? Because obviously parents have to bring their kids here, right?
They do.
Yeah, so not every parent can take advantage of it.
I'm gonna pull something up because you're actually getting to an agenda item here in a little bit, but I'm gonna pull a couple
As
things
I'm
up.
pulling that up, I'll just say it's such a tiny number like that we're taking. They're coming from various different districts, so in various different schools. So I don't believe that we're having any kind of material impact on any other school,
It's about half from the east and half from
Yeah.
Seattle, so it's not, it's pretty evenly spread numbers.
One of the things that's nice that I have heard from a couple of families is that there are families that are planning on moving to Mercer Island, or they may have even bought a house or they're building a house on Mercer Island, and this has enabled them to, you used to have like boots on the ground and,
Yeah.
mail to prove that you lived here, but they've been able to transition their kids earlier, which is nice.
So it's actually on our agenda. We're doing a part of our last board meeting because we had a lot on it. When we're done and as we're approaching 6, I don't want to usurp anyone's time, but just what we could do is we have an enrollment update as part of our next hour. If the board would like, and if you are all available, we can transition to that.
Not gonna take an hour.
We'll be done by 9. Right, no, the whole thing, but part of the agenda is the enrollment update, which
Yeah.
includes the open enrollment. If you're interested in hearing that, we could, and the board approves it, we could jump to that.
I do, yeah, that would be very interesting. I mean, I do just want to make sure that we don't leave here without the caveat that the state is facing significant budget shortfalls as well. And so no matter the sad and yet impressive information that you've provided and the real impacts and the recognition that there are these needs, I think there's a lot of angst on the state level, not just because we have declining revenue, we have increasing expenses, we have, an age wave, lots more seniors on Medicaid, we still obviously have to fund all of our schools, et cetera, but also concerns about limited and reduced funding coming from the federal government. And so there's, again, I think we're gonna have to make some really difficult choices of how we balance our budget. And so I just, again, don't want to leave here with the idea that, if for some reason we're not funding the full amount here is because we don't think it's important or it's valid or it's something that we should be doing. It's the state's really facing a tough budget situation as well. And so there's going to be, we're getting all our belts, tightened and concerns out there. So again, just wanted to be sure to show that.
Well, I mean, hearing that your eyes are on the same number that we are, which is, what is the total investment from the state in education? And even the recognition that I'm hearing tonight is appreciated, which is, hey, we slipped back down into the, mid to low 40s and we're trying to get back up, and knowing that is where the priority is. And certainly Representative Senate, we know that there are challenges, all around the board there. And so, what we tried to do, just also on the front part of this
Yeah.
that you can take with you is just kind of give you the story of one district, as we tried to adapt to McCleary, the new levies, to this new world with declining enrollment, ESSER funding that was temporary and costs, we've done a lot of things, a lot of tricks in there. We borrow from ourselves. We cut staffing, we, cut administrators. We've done a lot of those things, and we're kind of out of tricks too. And I think we're all out of tricks right now.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do in order to make a move? And we all know that it's not going to be closing the entire special ed funding hole. It's not going to be all of the transportation funding hole or all of MSOC, but if we can make some gains at some of those, it's going to just offset that overall impact that we're looking at in the outward years now. We kind of reallocated a lot of things. We kind of got that going. And now as Kay comes down in the back, Director Adams over there, she's reminding me as of recently this morning of get ready. We're going to have to figure out new ways to cut even more if all things are equal.
Yeah.
If there's some investment in, any investment's going to help us, and I know a lot of people say, well, where do we want it the most? Should it be in special ed or this? We're overspending everything.
Yeah.
So you want to put it on special ed? Great. We'll reallocate something else and pay for that. So.
And I just want to, for some reason, it's just a math thing, maybe a statistics thing. I just want to reiterate that while the state budget percent of education spending has declined, the amount of money we are putting into education has not declined.
No.
And so we are investing in mental health. We are investing in climate change. We're investing in early learning and childcare. We're investing in things that are critical and supporting families so that families and their children can be successful in our schools and in our communities. And so I just, when people hear that we've reduced the percentage, I don't want anyone to leave here or watch us thinking we've declined the actual dollars. It's just the percent of the budget because we've been investing in other places that have been neglected. Again, behavioral health being a huge one. And so,
well, and your investments have been eroded just like ours by inflation.
Yes.
exactly.
So whereas if we're spending more money, it just doesn't go as far.
That's right.
And so that's a big piece of that.
So, I think that if it's okay with, if you guys are interested in the update, we'll take, President Berry's suggestion and close out this session. Thank you very much. Our, close working relationship that we as a school district have with you, our representatives, is, invaluable for us just to be able to hear what's going on, to see where to focus our efforts, and to let you know that sort of how we're doing. And, do we need to do anything to switch over or solve this unhappy meeting? Okay.
And please stay as long as you would like.
Yeah. Get a riveting look at open enrollment. So this is a first look. And as I said to you in September, I would kind of come to you in November, and then you'll get another update in December as part of OE9. And then kind of January is when I'm kind of targeting what I think my recommendation to you is, with a hope that you could take action as early as February, one way or the other, which will just help our team when they're making their projections. So looking at open enrollment, just reminding us that open enrollment is governed by Board Policy 3141 for our non-resident students. Took a closer look at elementary enrollment and what we're looking at there. We have from 2010 clear over on the left-hand side. Those maroon years are the years leading up to the opening of Northwood. And so in 2010, roughly 1,700 students, growing up and increasing even more. And then as Director Close was saying, when you're bursting at the seams, the conversation was around whether or not to rebuild the three schools at a larger capacity or add a fourth. Obviously, the 2012 bond told us that the community wanted 4 schools that were smaller, not 3 larger schools. So that's where we went, and we opened up Northwood. And so what you see here in these darker bars here is really since Northwood. We kind of peaked out there in 17, 18, and then we started the decline. We had the COVID drop right here. And then what you see in the light blue is what our demographers are saying for our outward years. So we look to have over the next decade, little less than a decade, fairly stable elementary enrollment is what we're projecting there. Some high level numbers, just as a reminder, we had 150 students who were kindergartners through 11th graders last year who left the school district. They either went to private schools or they moved out of the country, out of the state, went to another public school. But the good news is that same group, when they rolled up the 1st through 12th graders, we attracted 350 new students coming in. So we definitely outpace students moving in versus students moving out, which is a great sign for long-term health. Where we continue to see a delta is we have 357 seniors graduate, but we only brought in 217 kindergartners behind them. It is a good reminder that's always been the case. Our kindergartners have always been less than at least in my tenure, have been less than our graduating classes. We tend to grow by about historically 100 students between that kindergarten class and that senior class. If we take a look here at where did the changes take place in those 1st through 12th graders, you can see we brought in a number of 1st graders compared to 1st graders who left. We tend to see that increase because we do have a number of students who are private kindergarten, Montessori, others who decide to enroll into our kindergartens for 1st grade. But you can see in every single grade level across the board there, we actually increased more than we decreased in terms of our enrollment in versus enrollment out. 6th grade, another transition year. We saw a number of new students arrive in 6th grade and only lost 19. This, we're going to talk a little bit more. This was buoyed up certainly by open enrollment. And so we'll talk about that. 9th grade was buoyed up by open enrollment, but that's not all of it. We saw a big bump in 9th graders coming in who live here in our zip code or moved here for the schools. So some really positive trends there. And the other positive trend that I'm considering as I'm thinking about open enrollment, pre-pandemic, just a reminder, just the number of students who are leaving our district versus and not accounting for the students moving back, about 4.5% attrition rate. You can see during COVID, that really went up to almost 8%. And then we started coming back down. And for the last 2 years, we've actually been less than where we were during COVID. So our elementary, just again, 217 kindergartners is actually larger than our 1st grade class. And we haven't seen that for a long time. We were able to attract in some 1st graders to buoy up last year's kindergarten class to get to 212. But we have a larger kindergarten class. I give a lot of credit to our schools who did tours this year. They did open houses this year. We just hosted a MIPA, Mershon Preschool Association event last week, brought in 50 families to do a Q&A with one of our principals, myself, directors. So continuing to really think about the competition for schools, as you said, online, charter, private schools, homeschool. There's a lot of competition. We have to continue to demonstrate our value. In Mr. Miller's wheelhouse over at the middle school, we brought in 17 more 6th graders than we had 5th graders last year. We brought in 13 more 7th graders than we had 6th graders, and we brought in 21 more 8th graders than we had 7th graders.
And again, that's overall, not just open enrollment.
That's overall. So open enrollment was only in 8th grade through 12th grade. And then in our high school, 8th grade through 11th grade, we had 1,342 students, and we actually gained 50 students between 9th grade and 12th grade, or in that cohort of kids when they rolled up into our high school. And our graduating senior class this year, or last year, was 357, and our incoming 9th graders were 350 kids that replaced them. And so we're starting to level out. And so that brings us to open enrollment. The board's seen this, but for you, 28 of the 44 students in 8th grade through 12th grade came from the Seattle side of the bridge, and 16 students came from the east side of the bridge. remembering that we have 62 students who are children of staff members who are enrolled in our school district. And we have 10 more students who are either children of city employees, or they're here under a different circumstance. They might have still been here from the 08-09 open enrollment, and their siblings of those families coming through. So that kind of brings me to, you know, what am I thinking in terms of my first look to our board? The numbers I'm really looking at right now are our 5th grade class, which has right around 270 students. Our 6th grade class, just slightly larger, 289. And then you can see our 7th and our 8th grade classes get a little bit larger. And then we're kind of leveled out here in 9th, 10th, 11th with a little drop down in 12th grade. This is FTE, not head count. So just remembering, you know, our senior class, as kids realize they don't need to take a full load, or they're taking other classes through ALE, we see that drop just a little bit there. So my early thinking is not to do anything with our elementary schools. I think we're on the right track in our elementary schools coming through. But I am starting to think about how do we get to that kind of 325 to 340 number in 8th grade. In talking to the high school principal and that team with Mr. Wold, you know, that 350 average for the high school gives them 1,400. And that's kind of that number where I think they feel like they're not getting upwards of that 1,550 that we were a number of years ago, but that 1,400 really allows them to offer a full complement. In talking to Mr. Miller, I'm trying to duck down. Oh, there he is right there. Chameleon jumping over there. We've been talking more around that, you know, 320 to 335 range. That kind of is what we're thinking about if we do pass the bond for rebuilding the middle school, is, you know, keeping between that 900 and 1,000 range there. So I started just plugging in some numbers of where we might have some capacity that we could think about. Last year, we talked about really limiting it to 8th grade through 12th grade. And at one point, you might recall in August, we actually stopped enrolling 8th graders and 9th graders for a period of time while we adjusted to make sure that we had the right numbers. I do think that strategy will serve us well in the future, that it's not about just opening it up and taking everyone. I think we have to make sure that we have some checks and balances, so that I'm talking to the middle school team and the high school team throughout of, you know, do we have the right number of sections, so we're not having to open up a new section and then causing financial burden there. So that's kind of my thinking there. I said last year, if we got to 40, I was going to be really surprised and excited. We hit 44. I think that same kind of number there, and I had a chart last year that I should have put in here, just kind of showing that, you know, I don't think that this is about trying to grow exponentially. I think that stabilization is really where we want to be. So Aaron, did you want to add anything from your perspective with doing the scheduling? And
so I think the last thing you said is that it's a fine line between how many kids are appropriate without adding new courses.
That's a clarifying question. This is like 30 to 40 additional, assuming that our open enrolled kids.
Additional.
We're not like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, not moving them out.
I think the second part would be that, and also balancing, bringing in students with keeping capacity for students who might move on to the island over the summer. It's really hard to tell them, oh, you can't be in X class because there's no spots available. So it's kind of a juggling game for sure.
Looking forward to the bond, assuming we propose it and it passes, current grade would be impacted by a middle school construction? Because we're still even if it goes as planned.
So it would be summer of 26. Yes, it's starting summer of 26. So those are probably 4th graders.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you to the person.
I feel like a board. You know.
Chance to get that, as a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So starting to look at our current 5th graders, Could be seventh graders or into their eighth grade year. So for third, fourth, and fifth graders, all kind of starting to come.
And so the sixth graders would be out.
Sixth grade would be probably eighth grade.
Okay, because I get, what I'm asking is, did you take into account capacity during construction when making the recommendations?
In terms of having between 900 and 950 in there, we should be fine with capacity with construction.
Yeah, I mean, they say there's an off chance that maybe a portable might need to come in or two, but we have enough space. We have enough rooms that aren't currently being used to bridge the gap.
I think one of the things that we'll have to talk about is right now, most of our classrooms, the teacher's office is also their classroom in the middle school, which is different from the high school where they have more offices there. And there might have to be some flexibility around that where some of the classes might be all 6 periods instead of 5
Teachers on a
periods.
cart for a year or two, which isn't uncommon.
Very cool.
Do we know what percentage of open enrollment students receive special services? One of the slides we went over with the legislators was that special education costs have doubled in our district over the last, I guess, 6 years.
Yeah, that's a good
And
question.
so, trying to understand what the financial impact is, not on the revenue side, but on the expenditure side.
Great. And I appreciate these questions because they help me then prepare for January to provide more. Absolutely.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. No, I was, go ask your question and then I'm gonna ask them a question.
Oh, okay. I would be interested also, and this might be getting to your question of the students, but I'd be interested in if there's a way to sort of, I don't know if you want to quantify or just get like some feeling from the student body of like the impact of our open enrollment students, because I've heard anecdotally, only positive things from people, just really appreciating the different perspective on the island, and also, one doesn't want to say like fresh blood, but you know what I mean? Like just sort of a fresh perspective. Thank you very much. That's nicer.
What if
That was exactly my question, was that, and I'll piggyback because it's exactly the question I was gonna ask is, have you guys noticed, what have you noticed, if anything, about the new student population at the high school? Or do you want to take some time and ask around? And then I think I would be curious. I think Jody is clearly curious. I imagine others as well. So either if you can answer it now, or if you want to take time and reach out to students and ask those questions.
What if we build into the survey? We're getting ready to survey through the superintendent student advisory, all new students. What if we built in are you here on open enrollment? And then they get a separate subset of questions that maybe we could tease out some of that on that survey.
Yeah.
That might be a way, but you might hear anecdotally about some other students too, but I was just thinking about that survey that we're thinking about doing.
I know at least 2 students who are here on open enrollment. I think from them that I haven't heard many challenges, and I know I haven't heard any negative impacts from anyone that I know, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, I've also gotten close with a couple people that are here from open enrollment, like Newport, and then this person from Bush. And I've heard that they said that a lot of people are pretty welcoming from what they've heard. I've heard that perspective. And then I've also talked to some teachers that are like, oh, one thing is I noticed that some kids that are open enrollment, for example, in English 10, sometimes they're not as used to the learning expectations compared to other schools. And it's definitely a more rigorous environment sometimes for some students. So I've heard that piece of feedback as well. Yeah. But yeah, we hope to see more opinions when we survey our students. Yeah.
Ian, did we have anything on the new family survey that was specific to if you're here with open enrollment, or did we ask anything separate on that to the new family?
I'll have to look.
Okay.
I don't remember right off.
I don't remember.
I don't think we did.
Okay. Great. Other questions that you have, or and if you think of some along the way that would help add some context or some texture to the conversation around open enrollment going forward, all ears have to answer.
Are you looking for feedback from the board right at this point, or?
If you have it, take it now or along the way.
I haven't heard anything but good things, just again anecdotally, right, so sounds like a very exciting approach.
Finance team, any input at all in terms of open enrollment and numbers or whatnot, or?
Well, the only thing I can say, you can pick and choose what programs are open and what aren't. And if we do not have the capacity to take special ed students, we can refuse a special ed student because it's a financial hardship on us. If we can't, an ELL student, we could actually refuse because our ELL program's full. So we can put stipulations on the open enrollment.
Okay.
And then, going back to when you were asking about the students, 6th grade to 8th grade being in construction. So just wondering about the high school, if those 8th graders then will enter into construction in high school, so they will have all those years, and something to consider in how to support those students that might have a high school in construction, or a way to set out the years that they have complete high school when they get into their, yes, I don't know.
Well, with this proposed plan, no one should be hit double, right?
They could if they are an 8th grader, then but
When they're an 8th grader at the time, the middle school's being done.
right, then
And then it could be finishing up at the high school the next year.
right. But remember, the high school projects
Okay.
will
so
be,
it will be the same, like 2 years for each cohort, and that's ish.
But at the same time.
Yes.
So that's when the facilities group was meeting, I think actually more the first one than the second one. One of the huge considerations was making sure that the same kids didn't hit
Yeah.
construction projects. So that was actually one of the benefits of starting with the middle school and high school, was that if you start with an elementary and then you're going to do middle or high school, it could be the same kids that hit it later on in there. And I was asking in terms of, do we really want to increase enrollment when we're having to move kids around? And as long as that's factored in, program wise, that's why there's so much prep work there's of course an impact, right? But that is one of the huge considerations of it, is to make sure that it's.
Yeah, with that comment, that question came into my mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
and we can ask Randy and the
Yeah.
team on Thursday.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's a huge, I mean, that's a priority to me at least, and participating in the planning groups is making sure that, we don't want to hit the same kids at every point. And those are, as we're getting to the current older elementary schools, those are also every kid was impacted by COVID, but the early years, the K-1-2 kids that really were impacted. Their school day. The ones that asked us to leave them alone. So, yeah, relatable, yes. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Moving on to next agenda, 3A, Board Policy 1800 OE7, Financial Administration Year-End Financial Report 23-24.
Great. I'll bring the finance team up to the table and.
Oh, Sebastian.
Yeah, you're back.
And Ken, Jackie, I will pull it up and share my screen, and you can just tell me which pages you want me to get to, or did you want to share your?
No, go ahead. Andrew spoke to me before. We'll just start on the cover page and then go to page 2, as Director Lawler was saying. Presentation.
Yeah, right up here.
There, yes.
There's none.
Okay, take it away.
All right, proud to present the year-end 2023-24 report. This is obviously a summary and overview, if you will, of the finances, expenditures, and revenues for the previous year. I'd like to thank Director Adams, Assistant Director Garcia Fogger for all of their work. Obviously, this is a summary. There's a massive amount of work that goes into reconciling the previous fiscal year, and they have a very short period of time to do it. Basically, about a month and a week, a month and 2 weeks, and they do it beautifully. So kudos to them and their team for all the work that they've done. As we jump into this, we'll hit page 2. By now, you're used to the style that we produce in these documents. Specifically, every time you see a table, we will typically have an analysis of why the numbers change year over year. We take a look at the previous year in this case and the 5 major funds, actual 22-23 to actual 23-24, and we look at the percent change. We go through, I was going to say, capital, debt service, ASB transportation, and I just mentioned general. With that said, I'll turn it over to you, Director Adams, to take a look at the analysis of each fund.
Thank you. As we look at this, you'll see the increases, starting with the general fund. We went from almost 70 million to 7.76 million. Most of that change is the change of practice with our capital CapTech levy. When I started in 22, I noticed that we were actually moving the salaries over to capital. They lose their integrity and you can't find out how much your true salaries are costing you. I contacted the ESD to find out the preferred method, and it is to do a transfer of funds from capital into general and to leave your salaries intact. With that, it's easier to calculate raises, to see how much you're spending on benefits. So we made a practice change. So that's why the change of 8.9 in the general fund.
There's also the issue of the dual W-2s.
Yeah, and if you're paying people for multiple funds, they would get 2 W-2s. It was also add a lot of work onto our payroll person, which we, she's already overworked as it is, if you ask me. So we did that change, and it does help us greatly see our true salary cost. And also the state did set up 2 special journal entries or general ledger accounts to be able to do these transfers. It's a 965 and a 536, and it will show up separately on your F-196. So it's easily traceable for the state and for us. So that's one of the reasons we made the change, and it's less labor intensive.
If I may, the F-196 is a state-required financial report that we submit to the ESD and the OSPI for approval. As of this point, we have a draft sent off to them, but they have not put their stamp of approval on it yet.
And how much is the number of FTE that we're now paying out of CapTech?
I have a dollar amount, not FTE. It's about, last year was about 3.7 million.
And is that a handful? Is that,
it's
because sort of the way when I think of it is there's several different, there's certain technology individuals, right?
Right.
Do hardware, so on and so forth. And so I would say their entire salary would be paid out of CapTech, I imagine.
Yes.
Then there are other individuals that maybe, I don't know, that a teacher that does some training on a software program and a portion of wages perhaps is paid from CapTech. What does that look like? What does that 3.6 million represent?
I could calculate the FT if you'd like. I don't have it right here and right now, but that is something we can calculate if you'd like and provide it to you.
How much on the, we pay the instructional technology day. We also have some of those
instructional coaches, technology coaches, and a small portion of the teachers' enrichment goes there too, because it's all technology based that we're doing.
How much of the instructional coaches comes out of CapTech?
Last year, all of them.
Just the instructional tech, not the instructional coaches.
Part of the instructional
technology coaches.
Yeah, we had, those had to come out. So, and in capital, it went up just by 0.3% because we finished some major projects this summer. We did the HVA system, the carpeting, we got it all done, which is awesome.
Boiler replacement.
Yeah. And then debt service, that is all on the debt service schedule. That's just ran by the state. ASB, it went up because of the Macy Day Parade. We had to pay for it. That's what the big increase for. And transportation is because we bought electric buses. Any questions? And the next one is just a pie chart. It just shows you a different way to look at the numbers. And so you can see the change in percentages just slightly. General fund went up by 1% and capital dropped by 1%. And that was just the practice, the change in our practices. Next one's Jackie.
Okay, on page 4, we're looking at the same sort of information, but with the revenues. So the revenues are proportionately from our portionate from the state, which is based on our student FTE, and then we receive our local taxes for the EP&O levy, as well as donations from the foundation and the PTAs. So the general fund revenue increased 7.79% from 22-23. And that has to do with the way that we're accounting for the capital projects funds, as well as money we receive for safety net, and an increase in the EEA allocation per student FTE. On the capital side, you'll see the revenue has gone down 5.6%, and that has to do with the accounting, but also as we completed the South Mercer Playfield project, a large chunk of money we received from the city of Mercer Island, 800,000, was in 22-23, and so we're not receiving that in 23-24. Our debt service revenue increased 4.31%, and that has to do with the change of the amortization schedule as well as the refinancing of blocks. Our ASB fund, the Associated Student Body, revenue went down 18%. And that was because we collected a lot of money in 22-23 to support the Macy's parade in November of 23. So there was no new funds coming in for 23-24, and fundraising activities were less than what they were the year before.
We also had some expenditures that we were attaching to ASB. DI comes to mind. We used to put all the DI money underneath the West Mercer ASB, and it became kind of the collection. And Jackie and Kay decided that probably wasn't the best accounting practice, and so we put it on ASB and started putting it into the general fund. So there were also some accounting practices that we changed along the way.
And transportation due to the depreciation we received from all of the buses.
Did the district have any cost for Macy's Day, or was that just everything was run through the district?
Everything was ran through the ASB, collected it all.
So ASB collected and then
Paid for it all. Through ASB.
but when we, so like, just for example, we get asked the question, you know, how much do we get from the state for performing arts, for music programs? Okay. And that's consistent here. It's just run through for accounting practices.
Yeah.
On page 5, we have the pie charts looking at the revenue for all of the funds, 22-23 compared to 23-24. And as you'll see, the general fund in 22-23 was 78% of all of the district funds, and in 23-24 it went up to 80%, and that has to do with the way we're accounting for with the capital projects as well as the money that we received for the grants.
Now the fund balance. We did have a slight increase in the fund balance. No, we did not reach our goal, but we had some extra special ed costs that were not recovered through safety net. We have to provide the services. So that's why we only see a slight increase of about $155,000. We were hoping to have more, but we spent easily $1 million more on special ed than we did the year before.
So I know our portion or reimbursement went from, I don't know how to phrase this, but the 30,000 to the 40,000, that's
Right.
unrecoverable. What would if you can answer, I didn't ask this ahead of time, what would our increase in fund balance have been had the state not made that change at the last minute with no notice?
There was 31 students that were on safety net. So you gotta think it's about 310,000. Okay, and we don't collect 100% of our safety net. They took about 152,000 off what we asked for. So right there's about 460,000 we could not collect.
That we
spent.
but also
Yes.
expecting to collect.
Yeah, you hope to get, all of your safety net, but they never pay you all.
I think, they always try to nick you for something. And so the 150,000 is pretty expected. It was the 300,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the $10,000 change. That was a new reality for
Yeah.
us.
So you spend about 40,000 more on a student before you can start claiming the funds.
But it used to be 30,000.
Yeah,
And then, and I guess my point is that it went up without notice.
Went to $39,995.
Any off the top of your head, what the fund balance, how it would have impacted our fund balance?
We would have had 300,000 more.
Right.
310 approximately.
So in our budget, we have looking, so it has a 4-year time horizon. And the budget that was passed, the target was an outside date, I believe, of 26, 27 to get to 8% fund balance. Perhaps I think it contemplated as early as 25, 26. Where are we with that now? And given that we're now locked into a 3-year contract.
Well, that will help having the 3-year contract because we'll be able to see the raises for the next, as we are budgeting for next year. Not knowing that when you're doing a budget is very difficult. Having new director in his special ed, we've found cost savings already, which will help us this year. And we already have items for next year to reduce, and one of them is to reduce by our reserves, to increase our reserves. So I would add another year or two onto our projection. Last year really hurt us. And, we have to, special ed is very difficult. You have to provide the service, even if the state doesn't fund you for it.
So we now are no longer expecting to meet the targets that were in the budget.
I think we're 1 year behind, but we're going to try. I mean, this coming 25, 26, we're already budgeting for maybe 450 to 500,000 gain in our fund balance. It is part of my projection on reductions for 25, 26. This year we will have a gain again. I'm hoping to be about 500 to 700,000. You got to be careful. We can't jump too fast. It'll cause too much of a hardship on the students and on the buildings. So we're trying to do it gradual without impacting the students. That's our biggest goal, is not to impact the students as much as possible.
Christine? No, it's acknowledging that it makes sense. It's an acknowledgement.
No, I'm saying because of Christina, I just say you're nodding along, because I mean, it's, it's an unexpected and substantial expense that we're gonna have to, of course, we're not gonna be on the same target as we were before it happened.
But the 300,000 was the unexpected amount, there was a bigger gap in
Plus
terms of
we
the
had,
projection.
we went to 7 out-of-state placements, from 4 to 7. That was not planned on. Those out-of-state placements are very expensive.
But we knew those out of place statements at the beginning of the year,
No,
right?
we did not.
Well, when did we know of them? Were they placed at the end of the year?
They were
Throughout the year.
throughout the year they went. Yeah, so it wasn't, we didn't know about it until the year started, and it was too hard. We couldn't cut staff after that point. And you have to pay the out-of-state placements.
And the board was informed though of it in August in terms of the financial impact, correct?
Of the out-of-state placements this
That would be
August.
missing the budget.
Oh, yeah. August, we went over it. I'm happy we had a slight gain. I thought we weren't even going to have a slight gain. And it took a lot of work to get us to a slight gain, which I was happy that, I was going to be happy if we made the same amount as we were last year with the increase in special ed.
And August 29th is when the board was told
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're trying to illuminate is that, where were we along, the route? I think if you go back to some of the budget reports that, as we started to see, we started to, especially as we were trying to recoup over the summer, the numbers were not coming in, to the exact extent of where we wanted those to be, and fully admit that we wanted to be a lot further along, with our gains. I think we thought we would hopefully get a lot more, not a lot, but a little bit more from the state than we also received, coming down. And even as we prepared for this year, I think we were disappointed coming out of this legislative session in terms of even some of the adjustments that they made, so.
And you'll see the reduction in the capital fund. We finished some large projects. And so it went down about 35%. Debt service, there was a change of 8.5%. That is part of the refinancing and the amortization schedule. ASB, of course, we went down because of our lovely Macy Days parade, which was wonderful to watch. I enjoyed that. And transportation, the buses we purchased. And
Any other questions on fund balance?
And there's a good description on the next page too for you if you want to delve into it more. We did list again that we did get the $2 million loan paid off. As you see, we left it in there for one more year. Next year, I believe Matt will be removing that.
On page 8, they delve a little bit deeper into the general fund revenue by source. So 28% of our revenue is from local funds, our taxes, the EP&O levy, capital projects, tuition, investment earnings, and donations from the foundation, as well as the PTAs and fees that we collect. The state funds 69.4% of the general fund, and that comes from, it's driven by apportionment, which is driven by the student FTE and the rates that are set by the legislators. In 23-24, we had an increase in our per student allocation. It went to 10,715 per FTE from 10,407 in 22-23. On page 9, the federal money that we receive, 2.1% of the general fund is for our special education grants, for Title I, Title II grants for professional development, Title III for bilingual program, and Title IV nutrition support, as well as some other grants that are not state or defined by other areas. And our other,
No, it's not time or paper.
other financing for sources is 0.3% of our revenue, which is from facility use fees and occasional surplus sales.
Do you have any feeling for what the difference in our allocation would be if they did switch from FTE to a headcount model?
It would be a difference of about 45 to 50 students. I think we look at even the November
For the head count.
I think about 1%.
I'm sorry.
I think when we looked at previous, it was right around 40, 1%.
Yeah.
About 130,000, I think, because it was on
Oh, you're saying
40 FTE, yeah, right,
about 11,000-ish per BEA.
Yeah.
but on the EP&O, on the BEA would be that, but what I think what Representative Sen was talking about was on the EP&O levy, because we collect on FTE.
Yeah.
It would be $3,200 times 40,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So 130,000.
But we're at our ceiling also.
Yeah.
Well, for right now.
Yeah.
So can I just ask, what's nutrition support? Is that like free lunches or like, is that something else?
That's the commodities that we receive.
Oh, okay. Nutrition support. Thank you.
The next chart down below is looking at the expenditures in a different way. It's by the classification. And this is one reason I like changing and leaving the cap tech salaries in there so you can see the true cost of our staffing. When you move them out, you lose that integrity. So that's why there's a jump you'll see in the certified plus the raise they received. They received the raise from 22-23 that they didn't get the full raise of, and then their new raise. That's why there's a jump there too. Same with the classified. They received their raises, plus we left the cap tech in there. Benefits increased, SEB went up. SEB's going up again this year, which is the medical benefits. Plus other benefits, you know, workers' comp, L&I, they all increased. We did reduce our supplies and materials because we knew of the additional cost in salaries and in contract services. When we do the budget, we go to the buildings and try to give them what they need for supplies and materials. Contract services went up, and that was mostly due to special ed contracts. And that's outside placements too. Travel is up a little, not real bad, but that did include the expenditure of sending families to visit their students. Because that is part of a law we have to do. So, and then capital outlay, we found that when I started that we weren't really recording the expenditures correct under that code. Capital outlays are for expenditures of 5,000 or more, or a component of items that cost 5,000 or more. That's why you see the decrease there. We corrected accounting practices there.
I just want to clarify for those who are watching that the travel you're mentioning that for those who are placed out of state, so those are families.
Yes, yes.
It's also travel, I mentioned before, like Destination
Imagination's
Imaginations
in
run
there.
through ASB. Now all their travel runs through the general fund, so
Yes.
global, state, all of those things. And we had a number of those types of groups, so that's what you're seeing there. It's not necessarily spending out of the general fund, it's collecting money sometimes from families, but into the general fund instead of ASB.
Yeah, because it wasn't an ASB function. And then down below, you'll see the pie chart that we created. And you'll see that the certified salaries were 44.5%, classified 18.1%, benefits are 20%. Benefits have really gone up in the last few years.
I'm looking at benefits compared to salaries.
They're more than classified salaries.
Can I, this is probably speculation. Do we have any hope of, are we hoping that our benefits will be impacted by in a good way by our new insurance commissioner? I mean, is that within their role?
I don't know. I mean, I think you heard them talk about it a little bit. I don't know their full scope of what they're gonna be able to do. I would imagine across the state, everyone's gonna be all over this new insurance commissioner trying to get those answers, but I'm not sure. On the city side, Matt, did you have experience with changing?
No, as a general rule, it's its own little organization set.
Yeah, SEB, that's all based on usage too. So as people use their insurance and have high claims, the state wants to cover their costs, so they increase the premium to us.
Prior to SEB, we had brokers and we were brokering for our own insurance. And I think my understanding was this was supposed to be a better deal for all of us and that this was going to be, a way to cover all the costs that didn't really materialize.
Also, part-time people receive full-time benefits now, which is great for the part-time staff. But anybody over prototypical school, we pay the state. Even if they waive the insurance, we have to pay it back to the state. What? Really? Yes. So if you're above prototypical school, let's say let's 75 people, and let's say 15 people waive that, we still have to pay that money back to the state, even though we receive no revenue for it.
We're not really paying them back. We're just using our money.
Yeah, we have to give them the money. Yeah. So we have to actually, even if somebody waives it, we pay the state for their benefits.
Is that the legislative thing to be looked at, you guys?
Yeah. If you're above prototypical school, I think you should have.
That's below it.
No one is below it. No.
No one. I
No.
mean, anywhere.
No. So that one is big. That one did affect the benefit percentage greatly.
Wow.
I know.
No, it's priority one. Stop making us pay for things that we don't use.
Yeah.
A lot.
Next on page 11, we're looking at two graphs of revenue versus budget for the general fund and expenditures versus budget. As you can see in 2018, where we were at to 23-24 revenue, budget being in the orange and actual revenue being in the blue. The discrepancy between 18, 19 to 2021 is our missing of our enrollment. So we project we're going to get this much money, and then we didn't receive as many students in the district, or they left during the COVID period. So that's the fluctuation there. But in 23-24, our enrollment projection was right on, and they met our budget just a little bit over what we expected. The same on the expenditure side, where we budgeted expenditures high, but we still were spending and using our fund balance to support programs. That's about it.
I think one of the things, last year, as positive as it was to hit our enrollment numbers with our budget, we budgeted 3880 and we hit 3881. That didn't create the cushion necessarily versus this year. We're up 80 students over budget. That's creating a different cushion for the first time in a while. And that's part of the optimism for a better financial forecast this year.
On page 12, we're looking at the fund balance of beginning versus our ending for the general fund, and orange being the actual ending fund balance, and blue being the beginning. We start off well, and then we hit our COVID years and used our fund balance to support our programs and services for the students, and we're slightly starting to bring that back up with our savings. The next chart looks at the percentage of our fund balance over the years. In 18-19, we're at 10.8%. We had our low of 2.4 in 2021-22, and we're starting to bring it back up. Next, we're looking at a summary of the fund balance allocation by fund. So in the general fund in 23-24, we had an ending allocation of 2.7 million, increase from 2.6 in 22-23. Looking at the other funds, we saw similar changes in terms of capital projects. Fund balance has gone down, but that was because of the completion of projects, the boilers and carpets and so forth that Kay had mentioned earlier. Our debt service fund balance has gone up from 22-23 from 6 million to 6.5, and that has to do with the change in the amortization schedule as well. Our ASB on the next page, actual fund balance of 531,000, down 306, and that was due to the spending for the Macy's Day Parade and the movement of the Destination Imagination out of ASB. And our transportation vehicle fund, slight change, and 1.2 million 22-23 and to 1 million, a little over 1 million 23-24. It has to do with the depreciation of the buses, but we also saved some money in our bus cost due to a waiver of taxes for the state.
And without the transportation, we've essentially expended all of the transportation levy from way before. Our main source of revenue now is the depreciation schedule at this point. Is that how our major is?
Is there any, since we didn't run a transportation, is there any need to at some point start talking about running a transportation money?
We have, William's going to come in February March-ish with our next transportation, long-range facility or long-range transportation plan. And I think we'll have more conversation then. We are working right now with some tax, benefits and working to try to recoup some federal, is it federal tax dollars? Is that what it is? Similar to, what's the one on the, technology side? E-rate? E-rate. So a similar thing to E-rate to get some money back. It won't be enough. So I think we do have to look at that, over time. I don't know. I think probably William will have more for us.
Yeah, it's the question is all, what do you want to do? You want to have a full electric fleet? Do you want to, get newer buses? Just some remedial questions. And with that would have to be a levy at that point. It's me. On pages 15 and 16, we simply provided some information, district-wide information, so the layperson who's reading this document has a better understanding of how we operate, function financially as a district. Under assets, we discussed the idea that, well, the fact that King County serves as our ex officio treasurer, our bank, if you will, to a degree. And then liabilities and fund balance, which we've discussed already in this document, but we give the OE7, the expectations, and then how we kind of process and pay bills also. On page 16, we talk about our physical assets, a list there. And as I noted at the final paragraph, since the district is not required to maintain fixed tax assets, would appreciate them. It becomes important to provide the board and committee with a listing of those assets, along with the TIV or the total insured value. And then finally, include the 1251, the official year-end student enrollment data that we submit and receive back from the state. And then we put this all online, and once we receive the approved F196 from OSPI, we put that online also. We have several years of those documents, audits, budget documents, and year-end reports also as soon as we can.
Questions?
I appreciate the district-wide financial information of that, and that's very helpful for anyone who's looking at this stuff for the first time.
Thank you. Once again, a huge thanks to Director Adams and Assistant Director Garcia Bob and their team. It's a lot of work to get this information reconciled and put into a report as quickly as possible, but they do it every year.
I was just gonna say, so just, you're advising a bunch of, non-accounting people, and while we might have come with different skills and background, that, if you can explain it to us, you can explain it to most of the community. So I will certainly say, if you can explain it to me. And so thank you. And it's just the transparency and the regular work that you go to in presenting us with the monthly and quarterly updates. It's really helpful. And appreciate it. It allows us to do our job by asking you questions to make sure that the taxpayer dollars are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And our mantra, as always, if there's stuff you're not seeing, something that's not called out as transparent as you would like, let us know. We can add it. It's easy.
I would also just like to say that since 2019, 2020, I've been looking at these reports, and every year I have a quibble. Every year I'm like, this graph doesn't make sense to me, or why don't I put these in color, or like the lens is too small. Like, I have quibbled so much over the years. There was not a single quibble from this year.
Oh, thank you.
Like, I looked at the whole thing, edited every graph, it all made sense to me. I was like, the percentages are like, yeah, okay, it works. Yeah, it was great. So thank you. Quit now. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Moving on to board call. Thank you so much. Got to that ferry.
Yeah.
Board policy 1800 OE9 communications. Don't, just kidding. 1800 OE7 3B. We already did 3C. Financial administration. 24-25 financial dashboard and September 24 budget status.
Yeah, provided to you is simply the first of this year, 24-25 financial dashboard and budget status report. I really prefer, if I may, on a personal note, present this with October, September, because I like to present the month over month and have a comparison. Wasn't possible this time. We just received treasury reports today from King County, so it just wasn't possible in the time given. So we just have September in here. In brief, we're at 1 month into the year, 8.33%. Expenditures about 8.4%. Revenues are about 7.1%. And fund balance as of the end of September is about 1.7 million. And we always see that drop because of the massive bills that come in. In particular, I'd like to point out the insurance bill that's due right off the bat. And our insurance is about $1.3 million. We need to pay that right there, and it takes a huge cut into that fund balance. But otherwise, it's moving right along. Once again, I'll have that written report for you once we have October, and I should provide that the first one in December, because there's not a second November meeting.
Is there any emergent trends that we should be aware of, such as the higher than normal rate of out-of-state placements?
No, we're actually down to 2 out-of-state placements right now. We should be down to 1 within the next few months. So that is a trend, but it's right direction.
Another one, out of curiosity, last year, I know the October, we were a bit surprised at the lower than normal, I think, tax collection last October.
Yeah.
We didn't collect as all of our taxes. What's October looking like?
We did collect all our taxes.
Well, over time.
Yeah.
When
October.
How did October shape out this year? Do you not know quite yet?
We don't know quite yet. We just got the treasury reports today. But we typically now have seen, at least with Mercer Island, I'll use personal experience versus Vashon Island, that we see less taxes received in October compared to April on Mercer Island versus Vashon Island. I couldn't tell you why, if it's the bank they use, when they pay, etc. But we don't usually see, well, topically, we have an $8+ million EP&O levy. I think we received about 2.9 of that, when we should receive 4 point something. But we will see probably 600,000 to 900,000 more trickle in over the next couple of months. But we do monitor that very, very closely.
Just a comment on, I think that what we also had to work is, again, with the legislators and telling the stories about out of places, because at the same time, maybe it's a trend that we don't have 2 this year, and we might base that off another student, but we might get 1 or 5. So that's something that it's nothing that we can control. And we have by law to provide our services. So it's more on how can we work with our legislators to make sure that when we have students that need those services, either the state has a place in the state that is a little cheaper, or is funded. So I think that is something that we just, being aware that is nothing that we can control.
Yeah. One of the things that I know they've pushed for is, instead of having to wait for safety net until August, is how can we submit along the way? Has been one thing, and whether or not that would help or not. I think the other component of it, when if I kind of look at it, is because all of the districts are running on such a razor thin fund balance right now, any movement, any big hits up and down are felt. The impact is so much greater. I'm aware of districts that were still deficit spending last year, several $1 million, because of just different things as they're going through. Then, as you're pointing out, you see another impact. And those things, you can really balance your fund balance in the negatives pretty quickly.
And I think I mean, from what we've been hearing, 7 is extraordinarily unusual. But what is important, just to reiterate, I think what you're saying is, we're looking at the budget, so it is about dollars, but these are our kids in our community who need these services. And for all sorts of complicated reasons with the state, and I know Represent is working on this and has been working on it as part of early learning and behavioral supports, in terms of trying to find more ways to serve our students in our communities, or at least in our state, that does cut down or would cut down some of the costs. It's complicated with the way our laws are. But I just to keep in mind, yes, we're talking dollars, but we're talking about making sure that our kids are taken care of. that I know I'm reiterating how you feel. So, that's, you know, and that's just life. Like when you get a big bill because your kid needs it, you pay it and then you figure it out. And I think the most important thing here is that we, continue our advocacy with the state and federal government help. And then just the transparency of where our dollars are going. And if people want to donate more, they can, because we want to make sure all our students are taken care of. So, any other?
I was just gonna chime into that to just say, on top of everything that you just said, that if a child's needs are serious enough that they need to be met by an out-of-state program, then trying to serve them in our district, which like would not be sufficient according to the law, et cetera, but it would put a huge burden on our staff who don't have the training for that type of, you know, that type of sort of like service. Thank you. That's and on, you know, other students in the classroom, that kind of thing. So it's like, it's all, you know, okay, I can't talk to you.
No.
Right, what are, just, Dr. Sullivan, what is the term when a district, if they're not gonna take a loan from themselves, but they want to get some of their apportionment from July and August earlier on, what's that called?
Apportionment advancement.
Oh, it's that fancy. We're seeing a lot more of that across the state right now of apportionment advances. And I think that goes back to how low fund balances are in so many school districts at this point. So those are all the things that, you know, that we haven't seen for a number of years. I haven't been around this side of it as long as you have, but
I've never seen that in the local districts. It's now becoming common almost. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, any more questions or comments?
that's it.
Okay. Looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, students?
Aye.
Board? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? 2050, we're adjourned. We will see you all Thursday at 5 for our regular meeting.
Yeah, runs of the tire, right?
Traffic's not too bad on I-90.
My, we're called bird, MPS, but now we're the bird launching instead of. Bird launching, like we launched our birds out of the nest. Instead of, it's a successful rather than,
Bird launching. I was thinking.
yes. It's what we all wish for, rather than, you know, a bird that falls out. Right, like we're launching them.